we're so fortunate to have Gil Penalosa with us this evening. Last fall, I attended the American Public Transportation Association's annual meeting, and Gil was the keynote speaker, and he literally wowed the audience. That's why he's here tonight. He gave a talk about livable cities and active transportation. He talked about how every transit trip begins and ends with either a walk or a bike ride, and how the best transit systems really provide that seamless integration. And as you know, here in Salem, all of our buses have bike racks to assist with that bike bus commute, as well as working with our city to improve pedestrian access to our bus stops. Before I introduce Gil, though, I would like to recognize and thank our sponsors. As I call out the names of the sponsors, if they could please raise their hand or stand to be recognized. So first is the Salem Kaiser Transit, and I'd like to thank our board of directors for sponsoring. And also Sadie Carney, the district's community relations officer, who made tonight this event happen. I'd also like to thank Willamette University and the Sustainability Institute and its program director, Joe Abraham. The Oregon Transportation and Growth Management Program. Representing the TGM program tonight are Matt Kroll from the DLCD, Robert Maestri from ODOT, The TGM program is a big supporter of active transportation. We're excited to have them as a sponsor. I'd also like to thank the Straub Friends of the Environment, the Oregon Transit Association, Pivot Architecture, Parsons Brinckerhoff, and Lane Transit Districts. You know, this presentation, this is a two-city tour. Tomorrow, Mr. Penalosa will be down in Eugene giving a similar presentation to that community. And so with that, let me introduce our keynote speaker. Gil Penalosa is the Executive Director of 880 Cities and advises decision makers and communities on how to create vibrant cities and healthy communities for everyone, regardless of social, economic, or ethnic background. As we look to improve the Mid-Valley, the 880 Cities philosophy can be a great model for us to follow. As the former Commissioner of Parks, Sport, and Recreation for the city of Bogota, Colombia, Gil successfully led the design and development of over 200 parks. His team also initiated the new Ciclovia program, which sees over 1 million people walk, run, skate, and bike along 121 kilometers of Bogota city roads every Sunday. It's an internationally recognized and emulated program, and if you recall, the city of Salem had a Salem Sunday Streets program this past fall. And so with that, let me introduce, and please join me in welcoming Gil Penalosa.
Thank you. Well, it's really fantastic to be here with all of you. I really thank you for coming because I know that each one of you really, deep down, everybody wants to improve the quality of life of the community. I know that each one of you had so many options of what to do tonight. Read books, go to the next door neighbors, go to the movies. So being here, it's an honor, so I want to thank you. And actually someone said, oh Gil, but you're going to go to Salem and you're going to talk about walking or cycling. Don't you know that people don't walk or bike because it rains too much? Or sometimes it's cold. And then I said, you know, that reminds me when I was working about this time last year in the Caribbean, they said, oh, we cannot walk. Or we cannot bike. It's too hot. And then I live in Toronto, in Canada, so I got on the plane. So I just realized, that, the weather is always an excuse. So we gotta learn from the Danish friends. They said there's no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. Part of bad clothing is we really gotta relax. One of the things that I find in many cities when I go is that a lot of the people working in the city, they wear this thing, this isn't good for walking or for cycling. So that should not be part of the dress code in the cities. Or high heels. I mean, high heels are fine when you get really nice bike lanes, protected ones. But when you only have a painted line, you better have all the gear in place. So, and then people just continue and they go on, you know. And I want to be talking about some mobility, but nevertheless, one of the things I find is, you know, whether the parks, are they important? You know, it's not so obvious. It's not so obvious. One of the things that I find, I go to many cities, and I tell them, you know, this is how the playgrounds look. And what do they tell me? They say, oh, Gil, go do some fundraising. And then in the same city, I show them a pothole. Oh my God, they go crazy about the potholes. As if a car was gonna fall in, or maybe a giraffe was gonna pop out. And then, you know, the media also goes crazy. The media, they hire someone, this woman, she has a section twice a week just to go and measure the potholes. And the community, they get organized around it. And then finally, when they take care of the pothole, the mayor, the engineers, the public works, everybody goes and celebrates. Can you imagine if we place the same emphasis on playgrounds and parks and things that really provide happiness to everybody? So we gotta start thinking, and part of it is what we're gonna be talking about tonight. What is the role of the streets? You know, when we look at any city from the air, Salem or Eugene or Toronto or any city, from the air, the biggest public space are the streets. And by public space, I mean the space that belongs to the public, to everybody. Young and old and rich and poor, fat and skinny, everybody. So how are we going to use it? It's the largest public space, and we know that walking or cycling or transit takes a lot fewer space. So how are we going to use it? I mean, we're going to think, this is New Haven, Connecticut. All of a sudden, you know, BPS based in New York, and we do a lot of work with them in many places. At communities with a blank page, we ask people, you know, what would you do? Like, if this is a street corner that you wouldn't want to be there for a second because it was dark and dangerous, and if you were going to live here for free, if you tell me some good ideas, you know, how would you improve this street corner? Anybody has an idea what to do?
Put a Starbucks there.
Exactly, that's part of it. How else? Actually, I was going to get a coffee here, and I said, you know, is there an espresso? And no, there is no espresso. We went across the street, we went to the credit union, and they told me that there wasn't really an espresso with the work. Yeah, so maybe I have Starbucks. What else?
Get rid of the cars.
Get rid of the cars. Why are you going to get rid of it? What are you going to do with that space?
Make it pedestrian walkway.
Make it a pedestrian. What else?
Plant trees.
A bike lane. Lights.
Create a gathering space.
What was it?
Create a gathering space.
Exactly. You know, these kind of things, by the way, you know, the people at Yale University would be very jealous because, you know, it took them 3 hours to come up with the same idea that you have to come up in 3 minutes. Maybe here your guys are a lot smarter than them. But that's the idea. That's exactly. Get rid of the first 2 cars. Why? So that you widen the sidewalk. Why widen the sidewalk? To put a bench, and to put a tree, and to put lights, and to ask the private sector to either put a Starbucks or to improve the facade. And actually a street corner that you wouldn't want to spend a second, all of a sudden becomes a destination place. And if you got one of these, it's nice. But if you got 5, you got a nice street. And if you got 20, you got a nice neighborhood. So that's the idea. You know, here there used to be a river going through here. And 35 years ago, someone said, oh, we need to be efficient. So let's put a street. And they paved on top of the river and they built the street. Because 35, 40 years ago, everybody was thinking efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. But now, people are thinking, in order to be efficient, we gotta have good people. And good people don't like to live here. You know, this is like I call them spiceless city. This is a spiceless city. So someone said, you know, wasn't there a river going down underneath? And 7 years ago, they decided to bring it up. You see the same store? Beautiful. And this is just done, kilometers right through the middle of Oros. And who wants to live here or here? So that's the idea. I mean, do we want our streets to look like, are we building streets for cars? Or are we building streets for people? Because we can do one or we can do the other. Do we want our streets to look like car stories? Or actually help create community? Because it's up to each one of us. I mean, we build these parking lots that work like a gigantic vacuum that sucks the life out of the city. Or we put street level activity and then parking in the second, third, and fourth. So it automatically changes completely. By the way, change. Today I was doing a tour of Eugene and someone was telling me, about what does it take. And one of the things is to understand that change is hard. Everywhere, not in Salem, everywhere. But one of the things we gotta learn is that change doesn't happen by consensus. Because sometimes the politicians say, there is some concern. No, there will always be concern. Change doesn't happen. So, like here, there were 93 cars parked. And when the mayor said, should we make this pedestrian? The guy in this restaurant said, if my clients don't park in front of the restaurant, I'm gonna go broke. And the guy further down was building shirts, and said the same thing. The mayor listened to everybody, but decision makers, whether you work for the city, or you work for the state, or you are an elected official, you have to honestly listen. But always keep in mind that the general interest must prevail over the particular. The general interest was to make it pedestrian. And you think that anyone went broke? 10,000 or 20,000 people buy more food than 93 cars. But it's not by consensus, it's not unanimous. So never wait to say, there's always concern. I mean, last week I was working in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And I saw some of these photos on the page, on the walls, and you think that these are just designs. Actually, you go down and actually they do build it. And they're still building it, And actually they're building a lot of roads. I was meeting with the heads of the people in Dubai and the RTA transport, and they told me last year they got 189,000 cars. So they said, that's why we need to build more roads. And I said, what? And I said, look, 180,000 additional cars. I said, if each car, you need about 10 meters for each car. Then you're going to need 1.8 million meters. That's 8,900 kilometers. Just to add additional road. I mean, 8,900 kilometers. This is a little bit more. It's about 1,200 miles of street space just to park the additional cars. Not even to move them, just to have them parked. So where are you going to have this space? I mean, that's like 8 times Eugene to Portland. 11 times. Every year. Not every year, not once. Every year. And it's not to improve at all. It's just to stay the same. So I said, where are you going to get this space? Where are you going to find, even if you have the money, where are you going? It's totally unsustainable, financially, environmentally. I mean, the only way really to improve those traffic jams is through public transit, and walking, and cycling. And one of the things that you have in Oregon that land use and transportation has to be work together, because they are two sides of the same coin. But still, these are the kind of things that we are doing all over the world. So we really gotta work on these issues, and we're gonna be talking. So we gotta change minds. And part of this is what I want to talk about tonight, how to change minds. We love working with children. Go to the elementary schools. And actually, one of the great things that you have a city like Salem, that is not too big, 150,000 people, is, for example, you can go to the schools. And when you do programs in the schools, you can go to every single school. And when I'm working in the schools, people say, oh, Gil, great. Go to the elementary schools because that's the future. So in 20 years, they're going to make a better city. No, I don't go to the schools because in 20 years, it's for today. Why? Because if we train the children very, very well, they go home, and they teach their parents. So it's for today. You know, a lot of the change in habits. For example, we train the children on how to recycle. And then they go home and they say, hey, Dad, don't mix plastic bottles with paper. They know about it. They know also about wearing seatbelts. They also know about not smoking and whatever. So really, I mean, instead of saying, oh yeah, but we're only 150,000 and this city is a million, you got a wonderful opportunity of having a smaller community than big cities. Because you can really create some change in so many other ways. Like here, we were asking the children, why don't you draw the community? How would you like your community when you have your parents' age, or you have your children in your own age? And look at this. This one, half of it is green spaces and parks. And look at this, Edgar. Edgar is only 13, but he wrote, I want few cars and I want many people walking and many people cycling. And then he didn't write, but he created an area for pedestrians, for cyclists, for buses. He's only 13. He doesn't know that we walk at 3 miles an hour. He doesn't know that we bike at 10 miles an hour. But he knows that we do at different speeds. That we walk at one speed and we bike at another and the cars go at another. And if we mix walking, pedestrians and cyclists, the pedestrian is going to get injured. If we mix cyclists and cars, the cyclist is going to get injured. So each one needs their own separate space. Each one needs their own separate space. And if that wasn't enough, then he also drew public parks and low buildings with street level activity. I mean, I remember a few months after this, I was doing a workshop with the PhD students at the National University of South Korea, and I said, those guys are really bright. I said, but I hope you study very, very hard, because now the 13-year-old kids can summarize Urban Planning 101 in one program. And the reality is that if we were growing like this, we would be growing pretty well. And Oregon is growing very fast. So this is a nice thing. So when people say, Gil, it's not rocket science. No, it's not rocket science. I never said it was rocket science. So we're going to be talking about cities for all. And cities for all, because we're not building cities for all. There are very few places in our cities where we would allow a child or an older adult to wander around by themselves. So I really want to thank you for inviting me to share some ideas and some experiences, because I want to share, but I also want to learn from all of you on these things. So I'm going to be talking about sustainable mobility, creating vibrant and healthy cities for all. And sustainable mobility about walking, cycling, public transit, and new uses of cars and public spaces, but of course, we don't have 24 hours, so I'm going to focus on this, on walking, cycling, and transit, and streets and sidewalks. So I'm going to define what an ADD city is, then I'm going to talk about the problems and the solutions and the benefits, and I'm going to end with how to move from topic to topic. And then we'll have time for Q&A and comments and discussion, and we're going to have a few videos in between. Any questions? Okay. So what is this about ADD cities? Yeah, we see here walking and cycling and parks, but those are not the end, those are the means. The end really is, how can we contribute to create some vibrant cities where we have healthy communities and we have citizens, happy citizens enjoying their parks and other public places. And actually, when I'm in any city, people always say, oh, Gil, is this intersection safe? Can my children go walking to school? Can my grandparents bike to get eggs or milk? Look, you don't have to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple steps. Step number 1, think of a child that you love. Once you have that child in mind, step number 2, think of an older adult that you also love. And when you have the child and the adult in mind, then go to step number 3. Would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking to school or to get eggs or milk? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not, and we gotta do it better. I mean, what if everything that we did in Oregon's public spaces, the streets, the sidewalks, the parks, the indicator is that it had to be great for an 8-year-old and for an 80-year-old. I mean, we would end up with great communities for all. I mean, we gotta stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. We gotta build cities for all. That's the idea. Happiness is very difficult to define, almost impossible to measure. But nevertheless, that's our goal in life. And actually, most of the important things in life are like that. Love, friendship. It's hard to define. Difficult to measure, but it's in the important things in life. So, let's move with cities for all. Because we seem to be facing a perfect storm in so many ways. We got traffic congestion, and we got climate change, and we got obesity crisis, and we got an economic crisis, and all of this seems to be overwhelming. All of this is at the same time. As if it wasn't enough, the population is growing, and we're living longer. So, I mean, the population is growing all the time. We've seen the population in Oregon, and in every one of the cities, in Salem, in Eugene, in Portland. And it's going to continue to grow because also you got these nice cities and people want to move on. So it's inevitable. And also, look how the population is growing in the U.S. The U.S. by 2050 is going to have 439 million. I mean, we're going to have in the U.S. 130 million additional people in the next 30 years. And this is not from some crazy nut predicted. No, this is the U.S. Census Bureau. The U.S. Census Bureau in their website are saying there's going to be 130 million. So not only do we have to improve the cities that we have today, but we got to create great cities for 130 million additional people. So it's really important. I mean, in the U.S., you're going to build 50 million homes in the next 30 years. 50 million homes. And when you start thinking, how much is 50 million homes? Well, that's like all of the homes in Canada, England, Switzerland, Chile, and Denmark together. That's how many homes are going to be built in the U.S. in the next 30 years. So obviously, there has to be a sense of urgency. In many ways, when you say, oh, let's think about it, no, there is not too much time to think. I mean, when you blink, there's a new neighborhood. So there's not a lot. Also, we're living longer. Now we see people in their 70s, in their 80s, in their 90s, and we think it's always been like this. No, it's not always been like this. Look at how it's growing. The population is it used to be there over 66%, 16, and it's going to level up around 25%. Look at the baby boomers. This is in 2010. This is in 2050. So we really gotta think, about this. People the other day, I was at a conference in Minnesota, and they told me 2,500 people about aging, and they said, "Oh, is that tsunami?" I said, "Why? The tsunami?" That this has nothing to do with the tsunami. First, because tsunami is unpredictable. It starts out of an earthquake, and you cannot predict earthquakes. So it's if there's anything easy to predict, is this. I mean, the baby boomers that are here, I mean, the people that today are in their 50s, in 10 years, going to be in their 60s. The ones in their 60s are going to be in their 70s. So if we have not been getting cities ready for it, it's not because it's a tsunami. I mean, it's totally predictable. And the other thing is because the tsunamis are negative, and this can be very, very positive. I mean, a lot of the people that are retiring are better educated, have better experiences, and in many ways are healthier and wealthier than at any other time. Actually, you know, that's why also we have a lot of the seniors rates. You know, we got seniors rates to go to the movies, seniors rates for transit, seniors rates for everything. By the way, you know, a lot of that is going to have to disappear because it was fine when seniors were 6%. Then 94% of the population were subsidizing the 6%. The other thing that happened is that 50 years ago, the level of poverty in the US was about 16%, but among over 60 was like 28%. So the seniors were very, very poor. Today, the level of the rate of poverty in the US is at around 14%, and the seniors is less than 9%. So this is something that the US has done fantastic. It has completely turned from having a population of seniors that were extremely poor to a group of seniors that overall are doing pretty well. So at the same time, so this is going to be something that is going to have to change. And I know that some people like to get the lower price on the airline tickets or whatever. But the reality is that also is not fair. You know, some of the poorest people in the US are single mothers. So just because a single mother is 40 years old, then she's not gonna get free movies. But instead, someone might be a millionaire, but if it's 70-year-old, then he's gonna get free movies. So we really gotta rethink a lot of these issues. But nevertheless, let me take you on this because it's interesting. You know, if we have, you know, after hundreds of thousands of years, if we had been born in the US in 1800, here are the ages, our life expectancy would have been 39. So many of us would have been dead by now. You know, it's amazing. Actually, 200 years ago, here's all the countries in the world, there was no country that had a life expectancy above 45. It's incredible. Just 200 years ago. And today, it's more than double. And actually, there is no country in the world with a life expectancy below 45. So it's very clear that, you know, we're living longer. We have learned how to survive. But when we see all of these issues, it's also very clear that we gotta learn how to live. And I think that's why all of us are here, because all of us are learning how to live in so many ways. Because this has a lot to do with the built environment. I mean, in a big part, you know, people keep. How many of you here are engineers? You know, they're very timid. No, it's great. You know, this is a lot of it is thanks to the engineers. Because, you know, 200 years ago we didn't have sewage and the water wasn't clean. Because the engineers always get hit in the hand because, you know, the transportation engineers. But no, it's because engineers that we actually doubled the life expectancy. And also because of medicine, the research in medicine. That's what people were dying of 200 years ago, the quality of the water and the sewage and so. But today people are dying of lifestyle issues, depression, anxiety, heart attacks, respiratory problems, obesity, or so on. So now, all of us, it gotta be not only engineers, but sociologists, psychologists, public health, education. I mean, everybody has to get involved in how to improve the built environment. Like, how are we going to get around? I mean, just 4 decades ago, people were going to school walking or cycling. Now, very few are walking or cycling, and almost everybody is using cars. Even though the cities today are much safer than any time in the last 40 years. So it's happening. I mean, too many people are driving to the gyms. They walk on the treadmills. I mean, other people, they go to 24-hour a day gyms. They go here, they pay a monthly fee, and they go in. What do they do when they are inside? They go up and down the stairs. They could have gone up and down this one for free. Usually it's because they don't live in a neighborhood that is walkable. that is not enjoyable. The sidewalks are not flat, they are full of cracks, they have a lot of barriers, the intersections are not safe, so it's not enjoyable to walk. So that's why we're saying we're going to create cities for all people. So how are people going to live? Where? How are people going to move? This issue of mobility is very, very important. So we got challenges all over, including Salem, including Oregon. But also we got fantastic opportunities. And I think that's the idea. We're going to build 50 million homes in the next 30 years. That's a great opportunity. But also a great responsibility because the population is leveling off. So this huge growth is not going to be indefinite. All predictions of population growth, not only in the US but around the world, is that it's going to level off around 2040, 2050. Because actually the rate of growth of the population now is much smaller. But since there's so much population at the bottom, it's going to continue to grow for another 20 or 30 years. But then it's going to level off. So whatever we build or don't build is going to be there for hundreds of years. So millions of people are going to live in those cities. That's why it's so important to build them right. So we really got to work on that. So, we build it. Sometimes people say, oh, this is the way we've been doing cities. No, we've been building cities for thousands of years. It's been only in the last 80 that we have been thinking more of car mobility than on people's happiness. And we created cities for us, not just an issue of money or engineering, it's about people. So we gotta learn, how do we want to live? How do we want to live? This is Melbourne, there used to be old warehouses 30 years ago, and factories, because that's what people did next to the rivers. Now, beautiful parks. So we gotta recreate the cities. We've been creating them for cars, we gotta recreate them. And there are some ingredients, like if you're gonna do a pasta, you boil water, you put on the pasta, and it cooks. That is the spiceless pasta. People don't like the spiceless pasta, so either you get ingredients, or people are not gonna come back to your house. You get ingredients, and now, same thing, the cities also have ingredients. What are the ingredients of a city for people? The most important is pedestrian. Walking is by far the most important ingredient of any city. By far. Why? Because everybody's pedestrian. Every single trip begins and ends by walking. We walk to the car. We walk to public transit. We walk to places. We walk to our bikes. Every trip begins and ends by walking. Everybody's pedestrian. So pedestrians are going to be the priority everywhere. Unfortunately, they have not been the priority. This is how we've been building the cities. It's horrible. I mean, this is an insult to humanity. This is the most important intersection in Toronto. And there's not even a shelter to take public transit. This was last week in Shanghai. All of this money, all of these cars, how these people in the car, they say, oh, I'm not a pedestrian, I have a car. Well, how did they get from their car to their places? Everybody's pedestrian at some point. So walking is, what kind of message? We're telling this woman every day, you are a second or third class citizen. In the US, over 4,000 people walking are killed every year. Over 80,000 are injured by cars. And what are we doing about it? All of a sudden we tell this person, oh, you're jaywalking. And they get killed, and we say, oh, of course, it was jaywalking. Or maybe it was talking on the telephone. I said, if your spouse was killed, or your children, because they were jaywalking, or because they were talking on the telephone, is that okay? Actually, today, you got so many wonderful things that I don't want to talk about any negative. But you might know about a commercial street that looks something like this. Similar to pedestrians are the cyclists. Cyclists, I think riding a bicycle or walking is the same thing. It's just a more efficient way of walking. If we're going to go half a mile, we walk. But if we're going to go 3 miles, we take a bike. Both are not motorized. Both you see people eye to eyes. Both build community. Both don't make any noise. Don't pollute. So, but if we're going to go further away, we take public transit. But we gotta keep in mind. Of course, you're gonna have a much better public transit, and we're gonna talk about it later on. You're gonna have a public transit Monday through Friday. So then, Saturday and Sunday you stay home. No, of course you need to invest in public, but public transit, it doesn't matter how good public transit is, will never pick you up in front of your house and drop you off in your place of destination. So if the city is not walkable or bikeable, then public transit is not going to be as efficient. So at the end of the day, we got to have good public space. The good public space is kind of the glue that links all of this together. I mean, if we had here just a stop for the public transit, that would be nice. But what if all of a sudden you got a place to sit, and you have a water fountain, and you have a place they sell coffee, and they sell flowers, and then the newspaper, and they have tables with people to play chess, and all of a sudden it becomes a destination place. So, and it's not that the people in Portland are any smarter than the people in Salem. I mean, this is doable anywhere. It's not rocket science. And then we're going to have sustainable mobility. That's the idea. And walking, cycling, and public transit, they're going to be best friends. And I'm not saying that this is the end of the car industry. But nevertheless, the use of the car is changing very, very fast. Actually, in the last 2 years, fewer people in the US got their driver's license, the young people, 18 through 24, fewer people than any time in the last 40 years. The proportion of 18 through 24 buying new cars was also lower than in the last 40 years. So things are changing. You know, cars used to be a huge status symbol. No, now for the young people, they'd rather have an iPad than a car. They'd rather travel, go on a trip, than have a car. It's no longer a status symbol. So the role, how we use cars is also changing dramatically in so many ways. I mean, we're having electric cars, and we're having car sharing, and we're going to have hydrogen cars, and all kinds of things. So all of this is changing. But nevertheless, I mean, even we are buying a lot of things through the internet. But we buy it on the computer, but we don't get it through the computer. We like a book, and we order, or we buy whatever. So then UPS and FedEx, they're hiring thousands of young people on bicycles. Why? Because to do the deliveries. All of a sudden, they get a big truck, they go into a downtown, and then they get 10 bicycles going up, picking up their things, and doing the door-to-door. So cargo bikes are changing in so many ways. And also, we're doing things differently. All of a sudden, we got roads that are only for public transit in the middle and pedestrians, much more people-oriented. Because we got to think, you know, how do we want to live? How can we attract? How can we retain people? You know, by the way, this morning I rode on the BRT in Eugene. So we're talking, oh, the BRT, well, can it carry enough people? Well, actually, this is going so in China. It carries more people than all of the subway lines in China, except line number 2 in Beijing, at 1/20th of the cost. So you gotta start thinking, are we gonna do 10 kilometers of BRT? 10 kilometers of subway, or 40 of LRT, light rail, or 200 of BRT. So with the money that you do 1 kilometer of subway, you do 20 of bus rapid transit. And you can carry as many people. But not only this, we also gotta start thinking of something that people think is soft, which are not soft. People that, you know, the ones that like to go underground, usually, are the rats. People, if you could go at the same speed above ground or below ground, people prefer to go above ground because you see the sun and the trees and the people and the stores and the shops. If people could go at the same speed. So this is also something that we gotta consider when we're evaluating different systems. So it's something that is quite interesting. And a lot of these things, it's quite interesting. I was showing these photos with people in Dubai because from going to one city to another, from Shanghai to Dubai, 25 minutes in non-rush hour. 2 hours and 45 minutes during rush hour. I said, but it can't happen. But then they put a beautiful bus, but the bus is in the middle of the cars. So it would be totally different if they see a bus going at 100 kilometers an hour when the cars are going at 2 miles an hour. So that's why I'm saying that walking, cycling, and public transit, they're going to be best friends. Because they are about sustainable mobility. And when people say, oh, trips are very long, no, look at it. In the US, 27% are less than a mile, 41% less than 2 miles. So half of the trips could be done in 20 minutes on a bike. So we're not going to replace all of it, but an important part of it could be done. And I'm going to show you some of those examples. Look, in Canada and the US, very few kids ride their bikes to school. Actually, we did a study at 88 cities. We went to a board of education and we studied the school. Why don't the kids bike to school? The kids said vandalism. I was surprised that there could be vandalism, so much vandalism. And then we found that most of the bicycle racks were on the back of the school against a wall. And then we found a school that had 23% of the kids cycling. And we said, how can you have 23% when all of the schools around you have only 3%? Don't you have vandalism? And they said, no, we don't have vandalism. I said, how come you don't have vandalism? And they said, because the bicycle, we got good quality, but especially good location in front of the principal's office. And that is very important. Actually, when someone from Salem knew that I was coming, he sent me this. This is the hospital here in Salem that was built. So then the architect, you put a standard, and then the architect said, I have no idea who sent me this. Maybe someone that is in the room, maybe not, but I thought that it's interesting. Because these are the ideas. You know, all of a sudden he said, look, the architects obey the law that said you're going to have so many bicycle racks per square meters or per car parking or whatever. He said, but you know, look where they put it. Right in the middle of the intersection where all the cars are coming. And then, so this remind me I thought that the appropriate place would be here. The same thing with the school. If we put the bikers on the back of the school against the wall, people are not going. I mean, this morning at the University of Oregon, I saw all of these bicycle parking with a small roof, which is nice. Of course, when it's raining, the bike is going to get wet anyway. I mean, but we love our bikes, so we like to have it. You know, when we get on the bike, it's nice to put it there with the roof. We feel that it's safer and that it's going to be in a nicer place. Then we go out and it's raining and the bike is wet, that's okay. But it just gives you a better feeling than if you park your bike here. So these are the kind of things that we got to think of. I mean, it's about, the other day I was at a municipality in Canada. And a councilor said, Gil, now everybody's going to use our buses because we bought these buses that are wide and tall. And I said, you think anyone is going to get out of their car into your buses when this is what the bus stop looks like? And then I went to a school, 1,500 students, and this is the bus stop for 1,500 students. So then I decided to show that counselor another bus stop. And then he told me, well, oh, Gil, why are you showing me this? I said, maybe this is what the bus stop would look like if the decision makers use the bus service. I mean, we gotta make walking, cycling, and public transit better. It has to be a better option. It gotta be, you know, I mean, it has to be either cheaper or faster or more convenient or all of the above, or else people are not gonna switch. I mean, when I started working in the public sector, one of my brothers said, oh, Gil, keep in mind always that the developed, the civilized cities are not the ones with the poor have cars, but are the ones where the rich use public transit. So keep in mind, let's keep in mind that public transit is not going to pick us up. So every trip begins and ends by walking. So walking gotta be it's just like the birds, they need to fly. Or the fish, they need to swim. People walk. When we walk, we use all our senses. It's magnificent, you know. We see the children playing and we hear the person. We walk to be happy, not just to survive. We see the children there walking and the older adults walk and the women and the babies and the young people in Johannesburg going to school. You know, it's in Vancouver, they have the walking buses so that they go to school as a group. And, you know, in many places, we see 30 kilometers or 20 miles an hour, 20 miles in front of the schools. Why 30 kilometers or 20 miles? Because it works. It works. But why is it that we want our children to be safe only in front of the school? Why don't we want the children to be safe everywhere? 20 miles an hour should be the speed limit in every residential city of Salem. That would be great if all of a sudden the city council approved. everywhere, except the arterials. When you have arterials, then you can go 30, 40, or 50 miles. But even those, you gotta reduce the speed a little bit. So we really gotta work on that. I mean, people walking in Rio in the summer, in Canada in the winter. People walk everywhere. But not only walk, I said walking and cycling were almost the same thing. So yeah, people also biking. And people biking is not just the men, 20 to 15 spandex. No, the women also, they bike, and every day the little kid learning how to balance, or the older adult on the tricycle. So people bike. I mean, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and sometimes I go to places where even the politicians, they get upset. They say, here, why do you want us to be poor? No, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling and public transit is a symbol of the respect that we have for people. It's a symbol of the respect that we have for people. So let's say you want to improve walkability in Seattle. Nothing as important as lowering the speed where people live. Nothing. It's as to 20 miles an hour. One of the reasons is because you save lives. If you get hit by a car at 20 miles an hour, there is only 5% probability that you're going to be killed. If you get hit at 30, it's going to be 40. If you get hit at 40, it's going to be more than 80% probability. Can you imagine? But not only is the probability of being killed, but it's also that it's nicer. When you are walking your dog, or when you are walking to the store, and you're walking with the kids, when the cars are going by at 15 or 20 miles, it's nice, it's enjoyable. But when the cars are going at 40 or 50, it's not a nice walk. So it's also about having enjoyable places. And there are many, many studies that show the same thing. Like, no one doubts decisions. By the way, in the States every year, 80,000 people get hit by cars. So when we're talking about lowering the probability of being killed, or having a disability, a bad one for life, Look at this one that Copenhagen just did. The red is the people being killed at 20 miles, at 30 miles, at 40 miles. So this is the 20, and it's not just because it rhymes, 20 is plenty. By the way, there's a fantastic website that is called 20 is Plenty in the UK, where over 12 million people already live in 20 mile an hour neighborhoods. 12 million people. So it's not something that is crazy. No, 12 million people live. And in many cities, we know how to make it safe. This is the kind of thing. We've been building cities for cars, so we don't put an island here. If all of a sudden we put an island, we save lives. Can you imagine that your spouse or your parents were killed in an intersection, and you found out that where there is an island, you reduce by 56% the accidents? It should be mandatory that in all of the crosswalks there should be a small island for people to walk. So when they say, and all of this, a lot of these places are much more than 7. This is 4,800. This is 57,000. So it's, and if we're going to improve bikeability, let me show you a little bit about bikeability. We did this video of Copenhagen and Amsterdam, and we don't have time to show both. I want to show the first part. Because the fact that people were saying, if we wanted it to be poor, so we said, let's think of cities that have a higher level of education, a higher income, and nevertheless people bike and people walk. By the way, in Copenhagen, 38 out of 100 trips are done on a bike. 38. And now they want to go to 50. They think, 38 is not enough. They want to go to 50. So let me show you a little bit what it is that they do.
Well, we are in Holland at this moment. It's Amsterdam. I'm living here, and my name is Eva. And this street is very special because there are no cars allowed, and so the children can play here very easily here.
So if you come to a city where many people are standing and sitting and relaxing and playing, that's because it's a nice place, because they would not start to do all this if it wasn't comfortable and nice.
People-oriented cities offer public spaces which are friendly to everybody. They give priority to people rather than to automobiles.
City was always the meeting place of people, the place where you can meet your society, your fellow citizens, and you can move about without paying and without being invited. You can move about and see what's going on and see the girls or the boys or whatever you're looking after. And that's one of the major interests of people, that is other people. And a people-oriented city offers that attraction, the other people.
Copenhagen, capital of Denmark, is an example of a people-oriented city. In the past 40 years, Copenhagen has transformed its public spaces. Step by step, Copenhagen has closed to car traffic its main central streets and vital places at the historical downtown. At the same time, the city has ensured an adequate infrastructure for a widespread use of bicycles.
There's very good quality about Copenhagen, about a city where you could be if you don't have a car. It's not on the premises of the car, but on the premises of the pedestrians and the bicyclists.
And in Copenhagen we can see that every year there are more and more people who bicycle to work and also to other things.
Denmark is a country with extremely cold and long winters. Nevertheless, in Copenhagen, 1 out of every 3 persons uses a bicycle to go to everyday activities.
Normally, when I get up and I have to go to work or to school, I take my bike and drive to school on my bike because that's the easiest way, the cheapest way, and the fastest way. Because the infrastructure is in Copenhagen made for bicycles, and I've been that way for many years.
And now we have a city-wide system, so it's a transport system. It goes from one door to the other throughout the city. You can really bike.
In a country where the average wealth per person is higher than in the United States, many citizens have chosen a bicycle as a means of transportation because they live better that way.
I'm going to go to the next one because I want to have time at the end for us to. So I was saying, I showed some of these examples. By the way, all of this is doable in Salem. You can do it here, and even better than some of the things. I'm showing you photos, 800 photos from many places. And some of you might say, oh, Gil, yeah, but that's not, we are different. But I want to tell you an anecdote. The other day, a counselor from a small town, Timmins. How many of you heard of a singer called Shania Twain? She's from this little town, 43,000 people. And a counselor called and said, Gil, you gotta come and see this park. I said, why? Oh, because it's a pilot park. I said, yeah, I'll go, but why? She said, oh, because 2 years ago you came and you told us about what New York was doing on the streets. I said, she got it. I was talking about pilot projects on the streets of New York, 8 million people. And she's doing a pilot project of a park in Timmins with 43,000 people. So she got the idea of the pilot project, and she did it. So let's keep that in mind. But if we want to improve bikeability in Salem, some people are focusing on doing things right, but we gotta do the right things, which is different. For example, I think that there are 2 things that we can do. Some nice to have, some must have. What are the nice to have? The nice to have are things that might make life better for the existing cyclists. So if you have 2% of the people cycling and you don't want to grow, maybe you want to go from 2 to 2.5, okay, this is nice to have. But they are not really going to get a lot of people cycling. I'm going to tell you about Toronto. I love Toronto. That's why I live in Toronto. In Toronto, we're the most multicultural. It's more than 1 out of 2 people were born in another country. The children love to walk in the rain, maybe because there is something in the water. We paint on the streets and we paint on the parks, and we use the streets also for lots of festivals at daytime, at nighttime. We like to run on the trails, on the flower, by the water, but also play piano in the park. And one of the things also, the kids are really smart because we tell them, walk on the grass. And the kids are smarter than the adults because they have very clear priorities. I was back in Georgia and I saw this. I asked his dad, I said, can I take a photo? This is fantastic. But unfortunately, Toronto has many good things, but not cycling. Cycling is not one of them. Because one of the things, the decision makers don't get it. They are focusing on doing things like sharrows. They don't work. They don't work on main streets, sharrows, signage. All of a sudden, parking. We got all of this parking all over the places. Even these lockers, classes, how to ride your bikes, and every year they print new maps and so on, and bike racks on the buses, and lanes. I mean, the expectations are so low that here there used to be a line. And when the city put the line, about 2 feet, the Cyclist Union organized a party here for the city staff. Said, oh my God, come on, what are we really got to raise our expectations on this. Painted lines, they don't work because they don't respect painted lines anywhere. The cars go wherever there's painted lines. I mean, I know that the cities are well-intentioned when they do these things, but they don't work. I mean, just think for a minute of someone that it might be you or someone else, who don't bike on the streets because you're afraid of biking on the streets. My spouse, my wife, she doesn't bike on the streets because she's afraid of biking on the streets in Toronto. In other places like Copenhagen, she does, but not in Toronto. Would that person that you have in your mind, would that person start cycling if we got signage, or we got maps, if we got parking or lockers, or no? So this is going to make life better for the 1 or 2%, but it's not going to improve. So there are 2 things that really improve cycling. Only 2 things that I find that really improve cycling. One is we got to lower the speed where people live. 20 miles or less where people live. It's not only going to be good for walking, it's going to be because you're going to be able to mix cyclists, and you're going to be able to create bike boulevards, and I saw that you're starting to think about the bike boulevards, so this is really, really good when you really lower the speeds. And second, we got to create a network of protected bikeways. Not one. Sometimes cities do one. The other day I was at a city where the mayor said, oh, Gil, we don't have a bicycle culture. And I said, what do you mean? She said, oh, we did a bikeway and people are not using it. I said, how long is it? She said, oh, 1 mile. Well, if you do 1 mile that doesn't connect anything with anything, it's not going to work. So we got to create a network that connects places of origin to places of destination. So that also think of worst case scenario. It's dark and it's raining and it's winter, and also to allow people to get out of their cars. To make it, look, Montreal, they used to have painted lines, only men, mostly men and students were using it. All of a sudden they changed, and now they got people, families, older adults, novice, all of this. So it's something that is really Paris, gigantic sidewalks with very nice bikeways. Mexico, this is Vancouver. All of a sudden you go to a place in Vancouver on Friday, this is what the street looks like. Look, it's so let's not spend too much time on this. I mean, once we do the other, then the sign, all of this will be nice. But the focus gotta be on the real of protected bikeways. That's what's really gonna make the difference. So these 2 things. So, I mean, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling is not a joke. Walking and cycling is the only mode of mobility for many people. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for all children and youth around the world. You might be the wealthiest person in the US or in the world. If your children are under 16, their only individual mode of mobility is walking and cycling. So safe walking and cycling should be a right. Should be a right. The right to safe mobility. Unless you feel that only the people that have the age and the desire and the money to drive a car have a right to individual mobility. And if we take away the word individual, Then it's not only walking and cycling, also public transit. It's gotta be a right. People should be able to move around, regardless of the age or the income or the social or any other condition. So that's why we're talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability. I mean, in Toronto, sometimes we got these streetcars that go with 80 people going behind a car with one person. I mean, if democracy works, that streetcar should have, with 80 people, should have 80 times the space of the car with one person. I mean, this might sound a little bit strange. I mean, there are a lot of things that we get used to. You know, less than 100 years ago, women couldn't vote, for example. And people thought that was right, they shouldn't take part of it, maybe they don't really know what's happening. Who in their right mind today would think that it's normal that women would not vote? But just 100 years ago, people thought it was normal. The same thing people think maybe it's normal that we got all these traffic jams with 80 people going behind a car with one person. I mean, we're building cities for all. And when we get 1.2 million people killed in traffic accidents every year, it's not normal. I mean, 270,000 are walking. 270,000 people are walking, are killed every year. 740 per day. I mean, imagine for a second, we got 5 planes in the US, in Australia, in Russia. 5 planes are flying today. They crashed, all of them, everybody dies. Tomorrow, another 5 planes. It's a huge crisis. Obama, the UN, everybody stops flying. Well, that's how many people walking are killed every day. The equivalent of 5 planes full of people. And what are we doing about it? What are the politicians doing about it? What is each one of us? I mean, it's clearly we're not doing enough. It doesn't make any sense. It has to be totally safe. I mean, people walking, they gotta be encouraged. Let me tell you a little bit about my previous life. I was commissioner in Bogota. And I'm going to tell you about Bogota not because I think it's better than Salem, of course not. Decades behind Salem. But nevertheless, people tell me, oh, Gil, we don't have any money. Well, Bogota has 1/8 the per capita income than Salem. 1/8. Also, now I'm advising mayors and things in many places, but I was on the other side. I was doing. So I want to show you some of these things. For example, in 3 years, in one administration, we designed and built 2 metropolitan parks, 25 zones, and over 200 neighborhood parks. This was one of the parks. The Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people. And then the city put a wire fence, and there was nothing around it. No sidewalks, no byways, in 27 years. Why nothing happened in 27 years? Because change is hard. So sometimes we reward people in the public sector is just for doing more of the same. Maybe a little bit better, but more of the same. So, but one of the things that I learned is that the citizens are paying people in the public sector every other week is to get things done, not to have 20 reasons why things cannot be done. So every person working in the government at any level should become a champion at finding solutions to the problems, not at finding problems to the solution. So on this was 27 years while like this. In 3 years it turned into this. This is where the book came. We built bikeways and sidewalks and places for people to go and run and walk and bike and lots of playgrounds. Very successful park. But another day you can invite me and we can talk about parks. But today we're talking about mobility. So let me tell you, in 3 years, 174 miles of protected bikeways. And it went from 28,000 to more than 350,000 people cycling. Always separating pedestrians and cyclists, for example, along the water drainage. I mean, we cannot take advantage of the opportunities. All of a sudden you're going to do anything in Salem, and it can be a trigger for something. So here, they were going to build water drainage for the rain. Okay, do a linear park next to it. In many places. And the most important thing is to build a network. Because again, if you only do a piece, so if you don't buy because you are afraid, and now 30% is safe, but the other 70% is not. I mean, some of these places were so poor that here in Salem, it's hard for you to even imagine in your worst nightmare. Look at the levels of poverty. By the way, why do we need good bikeways? Why do we need good sidewalks? Half of it is because we're going to be safer. But the other half is because we need to dignify the pedestrian. We need to dignify the cyclist. You know, that pedestrian that we saw in those sidewalks full of cracks and barriers and whatever, so that's part of it. It's also part of being consistent between what we think, what we say, and what we do. So we say pedestrians first, cyclists second, and then cars. There was no money for everything. So. And then the ciclovia. What is the ciclovia? On Sundays. You gotta have some that in Salem, but not one day of the year. 52 weekends, or at least 26. This is something great. All of a sudden, we open the streets to the people and we close it to cars. Actually, when I began this, I was imagining Central Park. I love parks. And 160 years ago, when Frederick Olmsted was designing Central Park in New York, he said, you know, in New York, everybody hates everybody. The rich and the poor, the blacks and the white, the locals and the immigrants. And he said, but they don't know each other. They don't live in the same neighborhood. Their kids don't go to the same school. They don't see each other in the restaurants. So we gotta create places where people can meet each other as equals. So I said, the open streets of the ciclovia is kind of the same thing. It's where people meet each other. And it's great because you don't need to build arenas or gymnasiums. You have the streets, open the streets to people. And this really changes minds. I mean, in New York, Janet Sarikachi did it because she wanted to change the mindset of the people in the DOT. People gotta understand that the streets can have different uses according to the time of the day of the week of the year. That's how we ended up doing over 75 miles. In 3 years, we went from almost nothing to 75 miles, and then we interconnected the main parks, and we created all kinds of programs. Not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate. By the way, in the US, 1 out of 3 people is obese. Another one is overweight. This is fantastic to get people moving. And also because we have that many studies with the CDC in Atlanta, that if people have this every Sunday, all of a sudden they don't wait till next Sunday to be physically active, but there is more likelihood that they're going to be active during the week. But not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate, so along the road there's aerobics and Tai Chi and cha-cha-cha. I mean, we get the young, and more than anything, it's an exercise in social integration. Because we get the young and the old and the rich and the poor. We get over 1 million people every single year. But we have done this in many cities of 10,000 people, or 20,000, or 30,000. It's many. Let me show you, I showed a few minutes of a video that some people did from New York.
So in the summer of 2007, my friend Ethan Kent had showed me photos that...
This is just so that you will say, well, if they can do it in Bogota, obviously we can do it in Salem and better.
He and his wife Ailey had taken when they went down to Bogota and participated in the ciclovia. Immediately, I was struck by how much fun it looked like it was. And we decided that Street Film should go down there and capture a slice of that and bring it back to the United States. In the process, we also hooked up with Gil Penalosa, who proceeded to help us expand our mission, and we ended up taking a look at the bus rapid transit system, as well as the parks and the cycle paths, and a lot of the livable streets improvements they had made in Bogota.
Only 10 years ago, parks were so not important in Bogota that someone could be elected without ever mentioning this topic. Today, no one could be elected to the smallest ward of the city without making parks and open space and bicycles and pedestrian issues a major part of the campaign.
This was a really great trip, in part because New York City right now is working to promote congestion pricing. The Department of Transportation is working to build new, more elaborate bike lanes, make the streets safer for pedestrians, and do all these wonderful things that have already taken place in Bogota. And so this was a really good opportunity to visit a large city just to see how these changes impacted citizens.
Look, before this promenade was built, this is what it looked like. So if you had come 10 years ago, this is what you would have found. This dump.
Gil Penalosa arranged a pedicab tour for us of this one section of the city that was really very poor. it had dirt roads, you know, for the most part. In some cases, we saw open sewers, we saw cows chewing grass. What was mind-blowing about this neighborhood was that it also had a bicycle and pedestrian path that was as nice and as finely engineered, really, as anything you'd see in Holland or Denmark.
As you can see, the promenade is wide enough. For one thing, it has really nice trees especially for this area where there's little rain, but you also have a wide space for the pedestrians and also for the cyclists. You have to separate pedestrians and cyclists because they go at different speeds. This promenade will be fantastic in the richest area of New York. But what's even more amazing is that it's in one of the poorest areas of the city. As you can see the neighborhood behind me, they don't even have one street is paved. It's really low income. So no sidewalks, no pavement. So this is really improving the quality of life. When these kids would come to school, they would be mud up to their ears. And it was really hard.
The promenade was basically everything they needed in order to be able to get their kids to school in a comfortable way, in a happy way, in a sustainable way.
It's not only a transportation street, it's also a place where the people could integrate. It's a social integration area. So I think that's the most important thing. People could meet here and enjoy with the family, with the friends, and that's a good thing because this is a low-income area, so the only option of these people to have fun is the free time and the public space.
Pretty much everybody was very eager to talk to us about ciclovia, about the bicycle lanes, about how much better the city is. They're very proud.
Y la ciclorruta es muy buena porque brinda seguridad y además de eso un buen paisaje.
Y es más importante la bicicleta acá. De una época no, hoy en día sí.
Para cualquier vuelta que tengan que hacer, yo siempre salgo en la bicicleta. Se me hace más fácil, más economía.
Just a bit skeptical because it kept talking it up so much. It was possibly the most fun I've ever had outdoors. The group of people in my life, I met a guy known as Electro Man, who's like a famous Recrovia dancer. Apparently he's out there every Sunday.
He is notorious for coming to the classes of the Recrovia and ignoring all the choreography that's taught by the instructors and doing his own choreography. Every time we refer to it as a large-scale street closure event, they would always correct me and say, no, it's totally more than that. It's about social integration. It's about giving people an opportunity to see their city, to know their city, and to connect with parts of their city that they would otherwise be isolated from because of the streets.
We're standing here at a Transmilenio bus rapid transit station. We're on an overpass here where people access the bus line, which is really in the middle of this highway.
Gotta move on, otherwise they will kick me out in a few. So, but now I'm working with 880 cities, and one of the nice things of working with 880 is that I have the opportunity to come to places like Salem, also share some ideas, but also learn from some of the things that you are doing. And actually, in the last 8 years, I've had the privilege to work in over 150 different cities. And I want to show you some of the things that I learned. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you an example of each one of them. But one of the things that I learned is this, that this guy is probably not a politician or a work on the public sector, because they don't want to take risk. Because the citizens and the media have been very hard on them when they take risks. But nevertheless, we need to encourage them to take risks. But it's okay, because like Einstein said, you know, we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use when we create it. So in so many ways, we gotta be bold. I mean, when we're growing so fast as we are, when we have so many issues that we have, we gotta be bold. But I know that sometimes politicians will tell you, oh, I don't want to be a pioneer, because the pioneers, they get shot in the back. No worry, they don't need to be pioneers. Many people are doing interesting things. Let me show you a couple. Suwon. Suwon, South Korea has about 800,000 people, so maybe a little bit more. But we've been working 3 years with Mayor Young. He wanted to show the citizens what a city looked like without cars. So he said, we defined 3 years ago, one neighborhood, 30 days, 0 cars. And we started working, and we invited the UN Habitat and ICLEI and all of this. Here we were doing a workshop with all of the commissioners and the senior staff in his office, and we went to the streets. And you know, part of it is infrastructure, but part of it is programs. Obviously, all of this is horrible, so it was changed completely, that infrastructure. but it was very interesting. Part of it was also programs and getting people out. And finally, this past September, we had 30 days, no cars, and we got people from all over. And the citizens, lots of public engagement in the plazas, in the squares, in the areas, the children, the future, the president. And one of the nice things, when I go to Suwon, I gotta go by Seoul. And look at this. In Seoul, they had a river that was going through the middle of Seoul. So what did they do? About 40 years ago, they paved it. 6 lanes of cars, and it got full. And when it got full, what did they say? Oh, what if we do an elevator? So they did a second level, and it got full. So then they said, what if we do a third level? You know, right through the middle. You know, 8 miles through the middle of Seoul. And what did the mayor do? He took it down. He took down the second, he took down the first, and he created a linear park. Can you imagine? Gutsy. I'm showing this because we gotta do similar things in Salem. Things that people would say, oh, it's crazy. No, maybe it might be crazy. But obviously it wasn't unanimous, it wasn't by consensus. Actually, when he was starting to do it, people said, Mayor, are you crazy? I'm gonna go broke because people are not gonna stop to buy coffee. As if people going at 60 miles an hour, they were gonna stop for coffee. And now, instead of elevator, now there's only 2 lines and public transit. Because the mayor said the only way to solve mobility is public transit. And now it's moving. And actually, when he was CEO of Hyundai, he built the elevator highway. In 2002, he was elected mayor and he tore it down. And then until recently, he was the president of South Korea. So something's going to be considered. In Paris. In Paris, you know, they didn't know what a public bicycle was. 7 years ago, they had no idea. All of a sudden now they got Believe. And Believe, now they got it everywhere. And it's so fantastic. Obviously, it was hard at the beginning because when they said, you know, the Rican, we got to take the 2 cars space for bike. They said, what? The Rican were very upset. Now they know that it's better to have 30 bicycles than 2 cars. But change is hard, you know. So they set up 1,451 stations. But I'm showing you Paris not just for the public bikes, because I think in Salem you need a greater protected bike, which is much more important than the public bikes. But I'm showing you because this mayor of Paris, he eliminated 7,000 car parking. 7,000. Can you imagine sometimes here you take 3 car parking and people think this is the end of the world. It's hard. Obviously, it was hard. It's hard everywhere. I mean, but if they're going to put 30 bikes, they got to take away 4 cars or 5. And then if they do 1,451 of this, then it's 7,000 car parking. And now it's like a public, now it's part of the transit system. Now they got over 400 mechanics and they got all the bicycle shops. And they got over 180,000 rides per day, these public rides. You know, at the 6th anniversary they celebrated recently, they counted that they have done the equivalent of 9,500 rides around the earth, of 990 to the moon. I mean, and this is totally doable. I'm going to tell you something about Bogota that I didn't mention because, you know, this is what the Japanese Corporation Agency were proposing, elevated highways, $10 billion. You know, thank God it wasn't done. This is what the transportation system used to look like. In 3 years, the bus rapid transit was built. By the way, it was copied of a city, Curitiba. Curitiba has less than 500,000 people. The population of Curitiba is similar to Salem, a little bit more, but not that much more. And then from the idea to implementation, 36 months. And then started moving more than 600,000 people. Now it's moving more than 1.5 billion people. But again, walking, pedestrians and cyclists and the connection, how are people going to get to the public transit? So this is something that is really interesting, and having the controls and so on the connectivity. How to get people in and out, and babies, and prepaid and faster. Getting the bikes, people go to the bike, they turn the bike, they get a token, they get on the BRT or the afternoon, they give in the token, they get their bike back. So, I'm going to skip that video. But, that was Bogota, but I know someone will say, yeah, but Bogota is bigger than Salem. Let me tell you about a city that is the same size as Salem. Almost 199,000 people. You know, they were going to do a mobility plan. So they involved everybody in the mobility plan. Walking and cycling and cars. Everybody. All the users, How are people move? Thinking in the winter, thinking of the summer, thinking of the people that go to work, people that go to school. Lots of internet in order to get to people's homes, so a lot of communication with the citizens. At the end of the day, the streets in the downtown, the cars going one way, but the bikes and pedestrians both ways. Every time the speed is high, physically separate at one level the cars, 3 inches higher or 4 inches higher the cycles, and another 4 inches higher the pedestrians, always separated, always counting. This goes to 0 at midnight, so when I took the photo, 7,800 cyclists had gone by. If you don't count, places to put air all over the places, and simple signage, how to get around. And here, you put a coffee shop, and then your Starbucks, and you put a Starbucks, and then it comes up. Lockers, so that people can have their books and things, and continue. Lots of public washrooms, so that you don't have to go to Starbucks for the washroom. 180,000 people, but look, bicycle parking underground with a small ramp so that you can push your bike down. One of the things, when I was here, there was music, classical music. And I said, why do you have classical music? They said, because it's on the basement. And in the basement, the buildings, they make a little bit of noise. So we don't want people coming here at night and getting scared. So the music, the classical music, tames the small noise in the park. So it's and look, but pedestrians first. When you're going to go to the pedestrians area, you leave your bikes out. Or you walk your bike. But pedestrians are the priority at all ages. And then all of a sudden you get the bumps. Why do you have the bumps? Because the cars can come in before 7 a.m. and after 10 p.m. if they gotta do deliveries. And then it's so successful with the retail. Even the Big Macs, they learn how to live with this. The children, I am going to school. By the way, in front of the schools in Netherlands, they don't have 20 miles an hour. They get 0 miles an hour. In front of the schools, there are no cars. Between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., no cars. They gotta go around somewhere else. And then they call it like a play street. So it's quite nice. Then the cars are not going in. And then, they got different kinds of games and soccer and things. So the kids are really eager to go to school in the morning because they're going to be able to play around with their friends in front of the school before. So, it's part of changing. And all of this is not about the money. This is not expensive. It's about having the guts, having to do it. So we're going to think of the 80 and the 80. Show you this one. So, and it's not only one city, many cities are doing it. Cities of 19,000 people, 18,000. By the way, okay, I think it was too late, sorry. Okay, I have a question. I have like 15 minutes more. Do I finish or? Yeah. I'm trying to talk fast. Why is it so important, walking, cycling, and transit? Because of the benefits. By the way, when you go to your politicians, go with the benefits. It's like if you are in charge of an airline and you are trying to promote going to the Caribbean. Don't show him images of the plane, everybody crammed up on the plane, or people picking up their baggage and the baggage doesn't show up. No, they show people on the beach having a margarita and people in their bikinis. Same thing when you are trying to promote walking or cycling. Show the benefits. For example, we are going to have cleaner air. Walking, cycling, and public transit has fewer gas emissions than any other mode of mobility. So tell them. So maybe a politician doesn't care about cycling, but cares about the environment. So tell them about this. Maybe the politician doesn't want to invest in public transit Saturdays and Sundays. So, but environment. Or maybe they don't care about the environment, but then they talk about mobility. They will say, oh, here almost everybody drives. No, we already agreed on that. People under 16, they don't drive. It's going to improve transit because how are people going to get to transit? In Christchurch or anywhere they walk. Or here in Japan, they bike. It's going to make us healthier. Is this what the future looks like? And this is a problem. That is an issue of hypertension, heart attacks, respiratory problems, anxiety, depression, and so on. So we really gotta work. So again, if that politician, we don't have to have the same. Maybe one councilor is environmental, so have the list of environmental benefits. Another councilor worries about public health, so bring the list of benefits to public health. Each one is going to be different. And diabetes, look at what's happening in diabetes and obesity. It's something that is very good. And why am I talking about this? Because the place where walking and cycling is a normal part of everyday life, the rates of obesity are very low. Look at public transit, walking, cycling, and public transit. So it's calories in, calories out. Look, if you do 100, they used to say, you know, no pain, no gain, you gotta do 2 hours and run marathons. No, now it's only 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Physical activity is the wonder drug. So we gotta get people to be physically active. Another wonder drug is public transit. Public transit, look at this. In Australia, they did a study. People that use public transit, they do 41 minutes of physical activity a day. Why? Because they walk 10 minutes to public transit, then they get on public transit. Then they walk 10 minutes to their place. They do the same in the afternoon, they've done 40 minutes. They go home, they don't have to go out and do a run or play soccer. If they do it, it's out of enjoyment, not because they gotta do their 30 minutes. They already did their 30 minutes. So also, that's why we gotta invest in public transit. It's good for economic development. Look, this is the CEO. The CEO, a business person saying, trails are no longer viewed as a community amenity. They are truly viewed as essential infrastructure for business recruitment. That's why talented people go to Billings, Montana. And actually, Billings, Montana was named by Fortune as the #1 small city in attracting business. Got 104,000 people. So again, so if another councilor doesn't care about public health, but it's about economic, give him the numbers for economic. Then in Brantford, the main street, you know, the main street was disappearing. All the businesses were going broke. So what did the mayor do? The mayor went and told the university, I want you to, they didn't have a university, they got 63,000 people. So they said, we need a university. No one was setting up new university. So he went to one university and convinced them. They said, I'll give you the place in the main street if you bring a school. So they said, okay, let's start. They started 5 years ago with 400 students. Now they got 4,000 students. Can you imagine 4,000 students buying coffees and muffins and renting places to stay and working and so on? And this is how it's been transformed. Now it's a totally economic success to have brought the people in there. Something that is great. I saw this morning in Eugene, they're building housing for students right in the heart of Eugene. Walking and cycling. I mean, when you're walking or cycling, how much can you carry for 2 or 3 days? How much carry when you're driving for 2 or 3 weeks? So when you're walking or cycling, you buy local. When you're driving, you go to the big box stores. It's going to improve our income. I know some people are going to tell you, I don't care about the environment, I don't care about public health, what's in it for me? By the way, thank you for staying because this is the most important part. The next 2 minutes. What's in it for me? Because those who don't care about the public health or the environment, they usually want to be millionaires. So here's the formula, how to be a millionaire. The US, the household income in the US is around $72,000. Of the $72,000, half of it is going into food and shelter. There is almost nothing you can do with this. This is pretty fixed. So this 36,000 are going to go to food and shelter. The other half, the other 36,000, are going to go for many things. Clothing, vacations, retirement, extended health, and also for something that we call now mobility. These are 36,000. So let's focus on this. This is pretty fixed and nothing to do. So now let's work on the half that you can do something about it. With the 36,000, if all of a sudden, you know, I'm going to tell you about how much is each car, but it's not my numbers. It's the numbers of the American Automobile Association. So the American Automobile Association says that the average sedan is $9,122. I'm not even talking about the SUV or the minivan. The least expensive. And so 2 of them are 18,000. So if you got 2 of them, it's 18,000. So out of this 36,000, you are spending 18,000 on mobility, the 2-car household. This is critical. 2-car household, spending half of it on mobility. So obviously they don't have enough money for the rest of things. No wonder 2-car households, they don't even have money to go to dinner with their family. Or to go on vacation, even less to go on retirement. If they could downsize to 1 car, there is nothing that the politicians could do that has a higher impact on the economic level than to allow people to downsize from 2 cars to 1. Nothing. Look at this. All of a sudden, then they're going to have more money for all this. And if they could downsize to 0, all of a sudden they're really going to have money for everything. So this is something that is absolutely critical. Go on vacation, pay debt, pay for education. I mean, so many things that are so much better than this. And something that is very important for politicians, the money stays in the local economy. Because if you're going to have, all of a sudden you're having $10,000 more per year, or $16,000 or $20,000, people are going to go to the restaurants, and people are going to fix their basement, and people are going to invest in their garden. So all of that money is going to stay in the local economy instead of paying cars that were built in China. So remember how we started. Half of it was fixed, half of it was variable. Of the variable, the 2-car household, you're going to have 17,000. The 1-car household, 26,000. The 0-car is going to have 34,000. I mean, weekly, let me put it this way. The 2-car household is going to have 341 more per week. The 1-car, 517. The 0-car, 650. This is huge numbers. Huge. I mean, it's as if someone won the lottery, except that the probability is not 1 in 10 million, but it's 1 in 1. It's a personal decision. So if we invest in public transit, and it's a system that is good enough for people to be able to downsize from the household to downsize from 2 cars to 1, or walking, or cycling, this is a huge thing. So this is about how do we want to live. And I know that there's change ahead. Let me tell you a little bit about Copenhagen. I'm a senior consultant with Gil Architects. And I know you're going to say, Gil, in Oregon we're different. We are unique. We have nothing in common with Copenhagen or Bogota or New York. I know that you are unique. Remember, always remember that you are absolutely unique. Just like everyone. Of course you are unique. Whatever they are doing in Eugene, you don't copy it in Salem. Whatever they're doing in Portland, or in Bogota or New York, no, you are unique. Even within Salem, each neighborhood is unique, each street is unique. So this is not like on the computer that we copy and paste, but rather how to adapt and improve. And we're moving, but we're going to move much faster. And of course, when you benchmark, don't say, oh, I'm slow, but I'm ahead of you. Of course, if you want to benchmark with Salem, with cities that are worse than Salem, you can find 1,000 cities that are worse. But if you compare with cities that are worse, eventually you're going to look like those. Instead, if you're like Salem and you say, okay, which is the best one in mobility? Which is the best one in public health? Which is the best one in environment? And compare with the best ones. Cities between 100 and 400,000 people, cities in similar climates, and compare with the best and try to be the best, then this is very important. I mean, change is hard everywhere. I mean, Copenhagen has just a little bit more population than Salem. Nevertheless, when they were going to create the first pedestrian street, they said, what, pedestrian? A street for people walking? The cars were also taken over there. So they said, no, we have too many cars. And the weather is horrible. Because it's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter, and like Salem, it rains all year round. But the number one excuse why they didn't want to say, pedestrian, that's not part of our culture. Pedestrian, that's for the Italians. Because the Italians are loud and noisy, but we are Danish and we are quiet and we are cold. Now the Danish are more Italian than the Italians. They love the pedestrian streets. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. All of a sudden, they went from car invasion to people places. 18 parking lots have been turned into people places. This was the first pedestrian street and so on. And they do it in the summer, in the winter. They plow, people of all ages. But they have fantastic facilities. 38 out of 100 trips are on a bike. They want to go to 50. But all of the neighborhoods. So we have to go through all of this. This is the last part. I want to tell you 5 steps how to move from talking to doing. How to move from talking to doing, because it's time to change. So let's go through these 5 steps. Sense of urgency. I mean, when we spoke about this and we said we learn how to survive, if this is not enough to develop a sense of urgency, but nevertheless, when we define our cities around cars, all we get is more cars. And then we gotta go out and invite our friends to help us cross the street. This isn't far from reality. The streets are getting wider, the cars are going faster, we're living longer, so also we're getting older. So then what do? We build more roads. As if that was the solution. Unfortunately, many developing countries are following the example of the US. I mean, these cars could be running on air. I mean, I've been invited 2 weeks from now to Google, to Google campus for a think tank on mobility, and they're going to show us their driverless car. All of these cars could be driverless. That's not the issue. Drive with driver without, there's not enough space. I mean, this is like trying to put out a fire using gasoline. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Poor guy. But if we create a cities around people, then we're going to get healthier and happier people. This is very important, again, for another councilor that has a different mentality. Because you got to compete, you got to build a broad alliance. You got to get the university, and you got to get the municipality and the state and everybody. And another thing, you got to have quality of life in cities. Why quality of life? Because we live in an ever more globalized world. And in a more globalized world, the best people, they can live anywhere they want to. However you define best, can be the best carpenter, the best medical doctor, the best engineer, the best musician, the best whatever you want. They can live anywhere in the world. So every morning, you gotta wake up in Salem thinking, how can we retain our best people? How can we attract the best people? I mean, if I'm a medical doctor and I could work anywhere in the States or anywhere in the world, where am I gonna work? Wherever me, my spouse, and my kids have the best quality of life. So that's why quality of life is not just fun and games. Quality of life is about the survival and having vibrant and healthy cities. Quality of life is the most important tool of economic competitiveness. It's very, very important. Second, political will. Political will, let me tell you about Melbourne. Melbourne is a small city within a big one. Melbourne resident population of about 100,000. During the daytime, and over 700,000 come in and they live. But Melbourne 30 years ago had 20,000 people. It was disappearing, 20,000. You know, even the people in Melbourne said it used to be a useless city center. 20,000. Now it has multiplied by 5 the population. Why everybody wants to go to Melbourne? Now it's in the top 5 cities in the world in every way. So let me tell you what have we done? Because people say cities don't change. No, cities do change. For example, they started putting public art everywhere. But public art not for the 60 mile an hour, no, public art for the 3 mile an hour, for people walking to touch, to look, to take photos. They planted trees. Look at the streets, how they used to be, horrible. And in the summer with the heat, they planted trees and it's something totally different. For everything, for walking, for cycling, for shopping. Yes. For planting trees was invested in public transit. All of a sudden they invest in public transit. Even created many of these streets only for transit and for walking and for cycling. Laneways. Some of these laneways, actually I saw tonight, this evening, just before coming here, some laneways here in Salem. They had all of these laneways that were dark and horrible. The only thing that happened here was that at 3 o'clock in the morning, people came out of the bars and they would do here what they should have done in the restroom in the bar. And look what happened. All of a sudden they turned beautiful. This lane was into fantastic places of art and shopping. And it was a teamwork between the public sector and the private sector. Because when the public sector said, why don't you set up here your flower shop? People said, oh yeah, but you know, it's risky. Here's a laneway. They said, I give you the seed money. I give you the first $50,000. And then, so they brought people. This is Rob Adams, who has led all of this transformation in the last 20 years, having a laneway going from this into this. Something that is really great. I measure things. Like here, coffee places, coffee with tables and chairs outside, they used to have 2. Now they got over 600. Not because they have gone crazy about coffee. No, they're crazy about people. No one wanted to live. Look at how many people lived in Melbourne in '83. And now everybody wants to live there. Beautiful sidewalks, beautiful plazas, squares, bars, shops, so on. And also learning how to use the public space. For example, this, I said, you charge a lot of money for this beautiful street furniture? I said, no. When you let somebody use the street furniture for whatever, for selling hot dogs or shoe shining or selling flowers, get them to do something else. So they say, look, instead of charging you $1,000, we'll charge you $100. But you gotta have every place clean. And also, I'm gonna tell you the hours. You gotta open at 7 in the morning and close at 8 at night. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But then, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you're gonna open 24 hours. Why? Because this is cheaper than having police. This is at noon, this is at 7 p.m., this is at midnight. So when you're walking downtown Melbourne, you know that there is some person here with a telephone, with an alarm, with lots of lights. So people feel safe walking on the streets. So this is something that is interesting. And the suburbs. But I know that some people here say, oh yeah, but we want to have the houses. That's fine. All you really need to densify is where you're going to have public transit. So if you're going to have public transit here, all of these houses were slaves to the car. There was nothing walking distance. Nothing walking. So they had to get on a car just to go and get an ice cream. But then they said, let's put public transit here and there. So let's densify only along the BRT. So they're going to put a BRT. And show people, you know, why are you against public transit if this is going to go from this to this? By the way, the buildings can only be as high. The height is the width of the road. So if the road is 40 yards, then the buildings can be 40 yards. If the road is 50, so then it stays. It's not this monster building. No, because you can have, people are against density because they always think of this, one gigantic building. No, most of the highest densities in the world are with buildings next to each other, but 4, 5, 6 stories. Very human buildings. So this is some of them. I know that I'm late, but this is so much. They're going to get so many good ideas. Let me show you 4 minutes of this video. Only 4 minutes. I'm almost done. This is the third one. You can do all of this here in Salem.
Melbourne is frequently cited as one of the most livable cities in the world. There are a lot of reasons for why Melbourne is a livable place. Great focus on public places, public streets, transportation. We're seeing a lot of multimodal investment increasingly in the city. Folks have done a great job with improving the rail network. There's still lots more to do. Big focus on bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. Some serious efforts on new bike lanes, separated bike lanes throughout the city.
It's just an amazing place to be able to walk around and feel very much a part of the streets and the shops and any sort of life that is happening.
It's the details, the fine grain, the cultural activities, the outdoor cafes and the little discoveries that make it a special place.
The interesting thing about Melbourne and many cities is that you look at the architects and the planners and you think, how have they influenced the city? In many cases, it's not the architects and planners that have influenced the city, but the subdivision patterns that have occurred over time. Melbourne was laid out on a grid of 200 metres by 100 metre blocks. When it was subdivided in the 19th century, the 200 metres was too wide for people to walk around. So they started introducing lanes and arcades through which people could walk. And to my left-hand side here, you can mostly see one of those arcades, the Royal Arcade. It's typical of one of the old arcades in the city. But there are other lanes and the service lanes that have now been converted to accommodate restaurants, cafes, bars, and they've really become the rich tapestry of Melbourne's pedestrian network.
So in this very regular rectangular grid, there are lots of opportunities for small spaces, for intimate spaces. The laneways offer art, they offer cafes, they offer little special businesses, and the little special businesses seem appropriate to the environment of a laneway.
When you start exploring the city, you actually find all these hidden treasures, like the laneways. You just don't know what you might discover when you come into the city, which is one of the attractions. And you also feel quite safe.
In many respects, the laneways of Melbourne has now created what I call a living organism that's really activated place and space. We've created a real sense of community with the retailers. They've got a real sense of giving back and gifting to local artists, but more importantly, they give back to each other. And what's been created here is a little village, a village hub. Back about 12 years ago, Flinders Lane was only so big in terms of its footpath here and only was a couple of metres wide. And as you can see, we pushed it right out to the edge where it used to be 2 cars coming down here. Now there's only 1 car up here, and we've got traffic hurdles and bumps, but importantly, we've reclaimed the street.
Over the last 10 or 15 years in the inner city of Melbourne, there's been a reassessment of transport priorities and just livability priorities, and that's resulted in pedestrians and cyclists being given a higher level of priority than they have in the past.
The interesting thing about cities is not always the big projects that are done, but the care and incremental projects. For instance, the flower store behind you was a conscious effort of getting a passive policeman in the street. So we're more interested in the fact that he's here until 10:30 at night than the rental he pays. And on the other corner, we've got the little cafe raised above the ground. So it's actually, people are perched above the footpath, looking onto the street, feel comfortable. So they again have this passive surveillance. And we work with an artist to actually hold the corner, so you get public art into it. So all those small things that actually make streets livable. The original footpath would have been round about this position here. We've widened the footpath by 3.5 metres. We've planted 100 trees, and we've taken all the cars out. The traffic that's allowed here is either service vehicles, trams, bicycles, buses, and taxis. Cars can come in the evening after 7 o'clock, but have to be out again before 7 o'clock in the morning. What's happened? We've doubled the number of pedestrians in the streets simply by widening the footpath and planting a few trees. Any city can do this.
Come over here and I'll show you what street reclaiming is all about.
Well, next time that you invite me, I'll put the second half. Sorry, I'm almost done. Sorry, it's so hard to cut because, okay, but I said 5 top. Third, leadership. And leadership, I'm not talking about all of these world leaders. This is a physical education teacher in Orangeville. And Orangeville has 86,000 people. And what did she do? She said each year fewer and fewer kids were walking to school. So she asked them, why don't you walk to school? Because they were afraid of the cars. So what did she do? When the kids went home on holidays 2 years ago, they came back and she was dressed up as a pilot. She shut down the parking lot. Shut down the parking lot of the school, of the elementary school, and they created 4 drop-off zones, not less than half a mile from the school. So now, and of course it was hard. She said initially she thought some of the parents were going to beat her up. But when they came, she said, good morning, and the kids loved her, even though the parents were upset. And then at minus 24, kids were walking, and kids were cycling. I mean, we need hundreds of infantils. We need them in the schools, in the neighborhoods, we need them everywhere. I mean, because part of it is infrastructure, but part of it is programs. Look at this. This is Romy Mann, the mayor of Chicago. He came last year. When he came, he saw places like Kansas Street. Kansas Street is a street dangerous for cyclists, for pedestrians. So they had very few bike lanes, and where they had bike lanes, they had them on the wrong side because the cyclists were protecting their cars. What did he do? He rolled out the sleeves, he started working, and he started paying 30 days. In 30 days, he got the first. I know so many mayors that in 30 days they don't even know the name of the executive assistant. This guy had the first protected bikeways. That's why I'm saying it's not a technical issue, not a financial issue. Number 4, we gotta have doers. Doers, you know, I like New York because people say nothing can happen in New York. The unions and the mafias and whatever. So one of the things, I thought the only way to see New York from the street was to run the marathon. But now you don't have to do it because we got these 2 fantastic women, Janet Sarikar and Amanda Bird. two real doers. But they found a New York that had horrible streets. And what did they do? They focused on public transit, look at the BRTs, public spaces, and walking. Another, so for example, they were 2 days walking, cycling up and down Copenhagen. They came down 9th Avenue, cars on cars. They go to the New York Times, they said they want to make it nice for pedestrians or cyclists. Again, not 30 months, not 30 weeks, 30 days. You know, and it's not an issue of money, or it's not an issue, a technical issue to go from this to this. It's a political issue. That's why everybody has to get involved. Broadway, crossing New York from one end to the other, had only painted lines. Who used it? The cars, the kamikazes. So she started taking lanes away, doing pilot projects that were initially Spain. Why pilot is good? Because then you tell the people, if they're against it, they say, let's do it for 2 years. If it works, then we do it permanent. If it doesn't work, okay, we'll let the cars in again. So pilot project is also wonderful to get along with the community and to allow the people that are against. And look at this, just flowers. And you got so much better weather than New York, and you could do something much nicer. And the summer streets, I know you did it in Salem, but one day of the year, you know, one day is not enough. You gotta do it the whole season or the whole year. I mean, and why did Janet do it? Because she needed to shake up the mindset of the people working in the Department of Transportation and the city bikes that they are doing. Times Square, I mean, if you had told anybody 5 years ago that Times Square was going to be pedestrian, they would have thought you were crazy. Well, they made it pedestrian. They went from this to this. All of it, not just 1 lane or 2 lanes. It used to be just cars. And all of a sudden now it's people. Who would have thought that the Department of Transportation was going to be doing yoga and Tai Chi in Times Square? That's really a change of mentality. But that's the kind of transformation that we need. That's why, I mean, they are great. And these are some images, because it wasn't just those, you know, it's hundreds and hundreds of things that they did all over the city. The kinds of things that can be done. Last, public engagement. We gotta engage. The citizens can no longer be spectators. Citizens gotta participate. I mean, we see so many places that are parks and plazas and squares that are underperforming. Cities find the millions to build them, but then they don't find the thousands to make it work. So with 880, we go in many places and we do community engagement and we get ideas. And when you are citizens, they come with so many fantastic ideas, hundreds of ideas. I'm just gonna give you one idea. When we're working this place, minus 35. I thought no one was going to show up at minus 35. Well, we had 70 people showing up. I said, tell us your impatience, tell us your orchids. What are the impatience? Things that you can do now. It's like if you do a workshop in Salem, ask them, what can we do now? Low cost, low risk, and high visibility. One woman said, Gil, when I'm walking home, the sidewalk is very dark. I said, yeah, but putting light on the sidewalk is not low cost. She said, no, it's very low cost because the sidewalk is very dark, but the street is very well lit. The streets don't need lights, she said, because the cars already have lights. So all I need is someone to go up on the ladder, and the light of the street, the light of the breeze, and then in orchids that are things longer term. And then we continue. So in so many ways, the idea is a sense of urgency, political will, leadership, doers, and public opinion. So I invite you to think outside the box. Let's create the cities for all people. It's a wonderful time for all of you to create a broad alliance between the municipality and the county and the state and everybody, the public sector, the private sector, and the NGOs, and get public health and environment and education and economic development. Everybody, you got challenges, but much more than challenges, instead you got opportunities. Great opportunities. Remember, it's not a financial issue, it's not a technical issue, it's a political issue. That's why everybody has to get involved. It's an issue for everyone. So today we talked about sustainable mobility and walking and cycling and public transit. We also talk about streets and other public spaces. But tomorrow we gotta walk and talk. So I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Walking, biking, and public transit. We can do better. And I commit the transit district to begin that public conversation and bringing the transit service back to where Thank you for being here. We will be around afterwards. We don't have time for public questions, but they'll be around to answer any questions you may have. Thank you again for being here. And how about another round for Gil Penalosa?